Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, along with Mike Schopp. It is the Purple Insider Fantasy Schopp, presented by Underdog Fantasy, as always. And wow, one of us
Here
is
we go.
covering a team that has a chance to go to the Super Bowl. It's not me, it is you of WGR 550. Mike, exciting times here. What a game. What a game between the Bills and the Ravens. That's one that I'll be watching back in 2032. I'll be looking back on YouTube and like, yeah, I remember this one. This one was a classic. That was incredible football.
I was so sure you're going to say one of us won $6 in the Wildcat, and it wasn't me.
That was me.
But yeah, like in 2032, are we still doing this? And we'll be older, and will it be cool? The Bills need to keep winning, or else it won't matter. That's the thing about the divisional round. There have been so many amazing games. Kellen Winslow, right? And it's 100 degrees in Miami and everybody's fainting and it's double overtime. Nobody can make a field goal. 41-38, greatest game ever. The next week they go to Cincinnati. It's the freezer bowl. It's -30 and they have no chance. And like, okay, well, in a vacuum, great game, but you've never won a Super Bowl and like, who cares? So that's the Bills right now. This is tough because it's so feelings driven. Doesn't it just totally feel like it's their time? Kansas City was kind of bad all year, and they beat Baltimore, who was great. They were even great on Sunday and lost because of the turnovers, which I kind of predicted that. I mean, maybe a lot of people did, but you just have to do it one of these times. And there's really nothing else to say about the matchup, Bills and Chiefs. I mean, the helmets have been sitting here for years, just waiting for the Bills to be on top. I mean, I'm trying. I put them on top. I even put their Super Bowl demon helmets over to the side, So maybe it'll be this time.
Our mutual friend, Eric Eager, who used to be a guest on this show, now works in the National Football League. He used to make a comparison with Josh Allen to Peyton Manning, where year in and year out, Peyton Manning would get his team to the playoffs, and it would be one thing or another that would get him. A stupid kicker, if I recall, at one point got him in Miami. Idiot kicker. Mike Vanderjagt got him at one point, or it was matchups, or it was didn't Ben Roethlisberger make a tackle to save a game? I mean, just it was one thing after another. And it's very much felt like that with Josh Allen, where he has been a top 2 quarterback in the NFL, top 3 quarterback in the NFL. And this franchise has been so well put together. And every year it's something. It's a field goal. It's a meltdown on defense, or an injury, right? Or, I think the Damar Hamlin thing really drained that team emotionally that year, and all those things. Every year it's been something, and this year there's just one more step. And I don't think that Kansas City as strong as they've been in the past. And I also think that if you look over to the NFC, where you had a 15-win team lose, a 14-win team lose, that I think the sheer number of calamity franchises pumped up some win totals beyond what the actual talent level of the team was. And I'm speaking from experience here, watching the Vikings play the AFC South, but I think that might be a little bit with Kansas City as well. They had a lot of things go right in the season, and also there just was not a lot of really good teams in the NFL. And when they played the Bills, they lost last time.
Right, and they played the NFC South, which didn't hurt them. I mean, they swept those games. Whereas the Bills played the NFC West and they lost 1 to the Rams, which was enough to make Week 18 irrelevant for Kansas City. I mean, the Bills went into that game with 3 losses, with the tiebreaker having beaten the Chiefs, and the Chiefs won, so they didn't have to play it. I mean, again, like what is left to figure out here? I think, I hear the Manning comp all the time, and what do we always say? They can't win it until they do. I mean, you and I are simpatico when it comes to this stuff, like the narrative stuff. You're just sort of dying for it to get blown up because it needs to be. And until it, I mean, I was arguing with people about Peyton Manning's brilliance 10 years after that, when he'd already won 2 and retired. And people to this day, you never hear Peyton Manning was the best ever. He totally was. Like, he was better than Brady every one of those seasons, but the playoffs dictate everything. And now you just get slapped in the face if you would ever insinuate that Brady wasn't the GOAT, right? So I think actually the Manning, the modern day, I'm so old if Peyton Manning is not modern day, but the modern day comp is Jackson, because Jackson, look at Sunday, he was incredible in this game mostly. I mean, plays down the field, all the stuff. We stopped talking about what he supposedly can't do. And now it's, well, it's mistakes, but the mistakes are so meaningful to the outcomes of these games. And the 2 turnovers that are on him are tough to defend, especially the fumble. Like, what is actually happening on that play where they're driving, and come on. And otherwise, he's just incredible. And Manning in the playoffs in his earlier years had games against New England where he was just like not functional. And that's more like what the Baltimore thing is than Allen. Allen has had an insanely good playoff career, and until recently, I never really heard him acknowledged for that or given credit for that, because they lost. Like, I think mostly the media-driven space kind of middled it with Allen, which is like, well, he's not losing them these games, but they're not winning either. So we really don't know what to do. Like, there are turnovers during the season, and let's just say, well, Mahomes is great, and let's leave it there. Whereas Jackson, we're feeding off of the turnovers, and Allen kind of lives in this, not purgatory, but in this space where, like, he's not blamed, but he doesn't have even a Super Bowl appearance yet. And so it's his time. I can't imagine what we talk about in Buffalo for the next 9 months if they lose Sunday. Like, what do you do with the roster? What does it say about Josh? Like, all that stuff. Sean McDermott has had this really, like, already a coach that's, kind of rebirthed the franchise and has had this great success, but not in the playoffs. And, like, he gets the blame for their losses more than Allen does. And yet this year, we don't have any of that. Oh, but this timeout, but this 4th down decision, anything like that. He's even getting credit now for how they defended the Ravens, who went for 7 yards per play on Sunday. So really, just it's a moment right now around here. Like, either they get back, they go to New Orleans, and I go to New Orleans, and we just sort of experience that, or it's yet another year, like, of the last 50, of trying to figure out what's wrong with them.
I think this year I felt this very same effect, the harshest that I have since I've been covering the team, because in 2017 it ended so terribly, but they had the Minneapolis Miracle, and everybody knew it was kind of a magic carpet ride that could end at some point with Case Keenum. And it was, well, it happens, I guess. And that's a shame, but what a season it was, that kind of thing. And then when the way that they lost this year, it felt much more like all those 14 wins. Why don't you just crumple them up and throw them in the garbage? They meant nothing. Anyone involved meant nothing. And just don't ever talk to me about this team unless you're rebuilding the interior of the offensive line. And that just felt so harsh and so tough, because think about with Jackson, I had to close out all social media after the game because I just did not want to see Lamar Jackson stinks. He can't win and this and then whatever else. It's like, I don't know, man. I know he made a couple of errors. Also, the referees made an error at the end of the first half that gave the Bills a touchdown, and his tight end fumbled and dropped a pass. Like, I felt that way about Allen for years, where Allen in that 13 seconds game was as good as any quarterback ever in a playoff game in NFL history. And then, I don't know, Travis Kelce gets wide open because he runs a route that's not a route, and whatever other stuff happens. And also, it's not just us, and it's not just narratives and media. It's also internally with franchises, and decisions are made based on these games because they have so much emotion to them. And I guess I'm curious how that affects the Darnold decision, because had Darnold gone for 346 yards and 3 touchdowns and they lost on a missed field goal at the end, maybe we'd be having a much different conversation. In one game against the team with a defensive line that also sacked Jalen Hurts 5 times. So I never know what I'm supposed to do with this. It seems logically preposterous the way that we handle these things. And also, it's just the truth of the matter. I wrote this about Kevin O'Connell. He just was named Coach of the Year, by the way. I got the email right before the show.
All
No
right.
surprise. Congratulations to him. And here's my article saying, well, in the next phase of O'Connell, you better win in the playoffs, because otherwise everyone will say you stink forever. Guys, if you watch the show all the time, you know that I'm a hat guy. But if you're wearing hats to cover up for your hair loss, then I've got something that can help you. It's called Hims. If you've lost your hair, that doesn't mean you can't find it again. Try Hims Hair Loss Solutions, and you'll be joining hundreds of thousands of subscribers who have found their hair again. Hims makes treating hair loss simple with clinically proven ingredients that can regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. Choose from personalized chewable, oral, spray, or serum treatments to find what works best for you. The process is simple and 100% online, so there are no uncomfortable doctor visits. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/purple insider. That's HIMS.com/purple insider for your personalized hair loss treatment options. Him.com/purple insider. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See the website for full details and important safety information.
Yeah. Well, just to say it, Darnold, had he had that game, yes, it would be a different conversation. He did not, and he didn't even come close to it. He had the opposite of that game, and basically that was 2 in a row. You can use the Rams' success against Hurts to that argument. You can also use the Lions' failures against Washington to the argument. So I don't know. We talked about what they'll do next year last week, and I don't know if it's any different, but every team, it's still really hard usually to know the answer, but every team has a different sort of puzzle structure. Ownership, what is the GM's security or status? Then you have the coach. The Browns are interesting to use for this, because like you have a 2-time coach of the year there, and like nothing else good. I mean, just the quarterback flux, to just put it mildly, and everything else around the Browns is like kind of a mess. But you've got a coach who I guess has proven by the standards of the awards that he's not the problem, and then you maybe want to build around that. And that's O'Connell now. I mean, it was already. I know you've been fending off, oh, he could be traded and this kind of nonsense. And, just like Jefferson last year, okay, well, what's the most likely outcome? And it was that he gets signed, which happened. And so he is now somebody, he's got the street cred, where if he goes, he'll be fine somewhere else, probably, or he'll get a chance somewhere else, at least, if not fine. And you sort of build around that. And that I think affords the Vikings a little bit more license to make the change at quarterback, because like what he took a guy, he was an early draft pick, Darnold, but he took a guy that was kind of nowhere and made him a star this year. And now he wins the coach of the year. And then I think probably he'll get the same chance with McCarthy next year. And Darnold, for me, would be one of a few. Look at the team to back into this point. Look at the teams that just have no clear path at quarterback. I mean, there are a half dozen of those teams, and guys like, well, Darnold might be at the top of the list, but Russell Wilson and Cousins are just kind of like, yeah, they're pretty much shot maybe, but we have to do something. And the rookie class isn't great. So it'll be another interesting year at that position, trying to figure out what to do, including in fantasy football, which, Indianapolis with Anthony Richardson, who was like quarterback 6 last year and couldn't stay healthy and got benched for Joe Flacco and they ended up losing. Like, what should they do? I don't know.
I think there's a couple points there. I mean, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you keep winning 10 games with the worst quarterbacks in the world, that you may want to make a phone call to the Vikings about a sign and trade or franchise tag and trade or something like that with Sam Darnold, because maybe, I mean, you could work it out with, I don't even know how the tampering works or whatever with this, but if you were to work it out with them at the combine, say with his agent, to sign a 3-year Baker Mayfield type contract and then immediately trade that to the Pittsburgh Steelers so they could afford it, I think that they would be thrilled. And I would be worried for him because of George Pickens and et cetera there, Arthur Smith. But still, I mean, if you're them, you've got to be so sick of quarterbacks who can barely exist in the league just being held together with glue and a running game and a defense and so forth, because they've survived and gotten to the playoffs just by being a competent franchise, but they've been so far down at quarterback. And I also feel the same way about Las Vegas. Are you not sending or Tennessee, are you not sending a second round pick and more to the Vikings to get a quarterback who just threw for 35 touchdowns when you've just been a joke? I mean, if Darnold is the quarterback of the Titans and plays remotely similar, I mean, they might have like 9 or 10 wins in that division, but they just couldn't win football games with a complete disaster at quarterback. So I think that has to factor into the decision that there will be a ton of interest.
Yes.
That's one thing. I also think about the NFC North and JJ McCarthy and Kevin O'Connell. So he wins Coach of the Year battling with the North, 14 wins in a season where people thought they were going to win 7 and finish last. And that's kind of how we always do it here, is who outperformed the expectations the most. And that was O'Connell, totally deserving for Coach of the Year. Going forward with a young quarterback, if that's what they do, it's not going to be a very easy ride to the top, because I don't think Detroit is falling apart despite losing their coordinators. I think Chicago possibly could have gotten a lot better with the offense that Ben Johnson can run. Green Bay is going absolutely nowhere. I don't know if you've ever heard it mentioned on a broadcast, but they're a very young team, which gets brought up every quarter of every broadcast with Green Bay. I mean, this is just a very challenging situation that JJ McCarthy is going to be dropped into if they make that choice.
I should know the exact number of possible outcomes ranking the 4 teams in the NFC North next year that there are. I used to be good at math, but I don't know that number. I want to say something like, if you ask 10 people to predict next year's NFC North 1 to 4, wouldn't you get 10 different answers? I think I might like the Packers the most, but how do you compare the Vikings and the Bears? Right? I mean, so right now, I'm saying on January 22nd, uncertainty at quarterback for Minnesota. Another year where they kind of flopped at the end. So what is it? There's some chance McCarthy just doesn't do it. And there's also kind of a fair chance that Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams adds up to success. And so I saw Sam Panayotovich of BetQL yesterday take a question about the Bears win total next year. And he's like, probably like 9. I thought 9? I mean, they lost 9 games in a row, didn't they? I mean, this coach is worth that much, but you have Williams and you have skill talent. Minnesota has that too, but I don't know. Every NFC North team is really interesting right now. The teams went 0-3 in the playoffs, right? They all lost their first game, and not any of them was especially close. And so, like, what a great division all year. This is awesome. And then the playoffs come and they all lose to other teams. So I think next year, looking ahead in fantasy, you know, we talked, when you and I started, we talked about the Packers all the time and like who's the go-to guy and everything. It was Jacobs. In the end, we all liked Jordan Love and we liked their receivers for different reasons. And ultimately, right through the loss to the Eagles, it was a Josh Jacobs season for Green Bay. Another reason why I just got pounded this year, because I was not drafting older running backs, especially on new teams. How did that go? Aaron Jones, but yeah, like every NFC North team is really interesting in their own way right now, and ranking them next year will be really hard.
And trying to figure out what Caleb Williams or JJ McCarthy are going to be. I mean, with the Lions, I think it's still safe to say that Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta, and that offensive line. Maybe they'll bring back Kevin Zeitler. Like that's just not. It would be very hard to mess up. They got a lot of phone calls, I'm sure. Can I be your offensive coordinator?
Yeah.
Because whoever is the offensive coordinator will probably end up with a head coaching job shortly. Just based on the talent that they have there. I don't think they'll win 15, and I don't think it'll be exactly the same as it was with Ben Johnson. But even if it's like, remember when Atlanta lost Kyle Shanahan, the next year there's still one pass from Matt Ryan to Julio Jones away from beating the Eagles, winning a playoff game, and then having to come to Minnesota and play the Vikings, who they had lost to. That close, that close. Oh, it's football. But they were still a good offense. It wasn't exactly the same. I think Steve Sarkisian may have actually been their offensive coordinator, and it was flawed, but they were still good because they had so much talent. And I think it's going to be the same way with Detroit and with Green Bay. I think they have to go into this offseason and think, how are we going to find a wide receiver who's really our go-to guy? Because just having a lot of good, it did cause problems. And I guess that's because they don't have Josh Allen, or maybe we underrated Khalil Shakir, who's really good.
Well, it's also, as you know, and this has come up all season with Minnesota, a function of how good your defense is. And like Green Bay played defense, so they never threw passes. Like that was a team. The thesis of the play was, okay, love, and yes, I'm in on this coaching. I'm in on this. Detroit and what they can do. Maybe Minnesota's bad on defense. They both play indoors. AFC South schedule, everything led me to the Packers and the Bears, both as good plays, and they just got me beat in fantasy because Green Bay was only Jacobs, who I avoided, and Chicago, it was nobody. So the Packers, they just need to be in game scripts where they won't hand the ball off all day, and you have Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks being the equivalent or better to like a Dontavian Wicks or somebody like that in fantasy, which is just not usable. So that's something else. I mean, we talk about offensive line matchups, the little things that aren't little at all in real football to try to know the answers to, and just the ripple effects of those things. The Packers just, yeah, we like all of it, but they never pass. So where does that leave us? I want to think that Love and that talent, and maybe one more guy, like you're saying, could mean really big things next year. I think I'm going to want to be on that because I think a lot of the field will not be. They'll just sort of be jaded by what happened this year.
Question about fantasy related for you: the Vikings backfield for next year. I doubt you have had the time, considering your team is in the AFC Championship, to look
Okay.
at the free agent list of running backs for next year.
I'm doing it right now.
But what you're going to, I'd like you to make a face that is your reaction to the free agents. It's not going to be a nice face. Yeah, that's a good one. Rico Dowdle, our guy Rico Dowdle, who I wasn't sure was real at the beginning of the season, is at the top of the list. And aside from that, there are not many guys that you could see being a difference maker, which has even led us to a conversation that I never thought I would have, which is about whether it makes sense to draft a first-round running back for the Vikings because they have everything else on offense, and teams that have been able to put everything else together have gotten huge production out of running backs. And it actually made me think about just running backs throughout history and how, like Marshall Faulk with The Greatest Show on Turf, if you have everything else and that guy, and it maximizes all of his talents, it's super scary. And this would go for our friend Thurman Thomas the same way. If you ask that guy to be your whole offense, it's not super scary, and he's going to average 4.2 yards a carry for the Giants like Saquon, or 6 for the Eagles. And I think that might be the case with the Vikings in that position, I also think that if you're Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, you can't be thinking about drafting a running back in the first round, right? I think they're in a little bit of a tricky spot there in the backfield.
Oh, yeah. This is a great topic. It always is. Last year, the mold was broken with the veteran running backs getting paid and signed. Like, I mean, even Mixon was Adam Schefter. Like they tell him everything that's going to happen, and he's getting cut by the Bengals. And then an hour later, the Texans traded for him and signed him to an extension. Like it was so upside down last year with the veterans. And Barkley worked out. Derrick Henry worked out. Those teams haven't made the Super Bowl yet. Baltimore's done. Again, how fickle it is. And DeAndre Swift was the first guy signed of all of them, and that didn't work out at all for Chicago. McCaffrey's old and he barely played. There's all kinds of different examples you can draw from. But to your point about the free agent crop, yeah, it's terrible. Like I've had time to look at that. I have not had time to look at the draft class, but people that I follow who have say there's a lot of talent. It's a running back year. And Genty will be a first round pick, it sounds like. Maybe before it's Minnesota's turn. Like that could be Dallas. That could be exactly what you laid out, but for a worse team that has, like, the Cowboys are kind of perfect. They sort of have the rest of it. And they passed this year. They could have drafted Bucky Irving or something on Saturday and just didn't. They traded the one pick they could have used on that player for Trey Lance, actually. So Dallas is down bad for this, but there should be the kind of depth at running back. And I might want to say at this early date, what happened this year in the league means we get a lot more guys on day 2. And so teams like Minnesota and several others could end up profiting there if it works out, which will make fantasy really complicated or just challenging because, again, like every year is different. And this year we kind of leaned into even Jonathan Brooks, who was a day 2 pick off an ACL injury. Trey Benson to Arizona, old running back there, and Connor. What happened? Connor played every down all season. So it was such a bad year in this way. And it was really bad. But maybe next year you get day 2 guys. And again, like the Packers point I just made, maybe there's sort of like a push in the other direction because everybody got burned last year. And in fantasy, it pays off.
I think that they almost have to, because when you look at the free agent list, I just don't know what to do with that. I mean, unless you're bringing in Dowdle, and with Aaron Jones, he's expressed his desire to come back. For me, that is just red flags on top of a big giant red flag. Like think of one, and then there's like mini red flags all over it. 31 years old. He was beat up almost every single game. And this guy is an absolute warrior. I was so impressed and blown away being around him. Everything that everybody said about him coming here was totally true. But we also have to use the objective. You're 31 years old and you were on the injury report probably 12 times throughout this year. That's just really risky. And I think the biggest L for them, and we never asked, because it seems so obvious that they would just keep playing Aaron Jones. But what happened with Ty Chandler? I mean, the guy goes from running for 400 something yards, 4.5 yards a carry, to is not allowed anywhere near a football. Just you stay on the sidelines. Don't even look at the field, Ty Chandler. They go get Akers. He does pretty well, but that's just a patchwork, and
you answered that question before the season started. Mm-hmm. Because everybody in fantasy mostly liked the Chandler bet. He's one of these guys that was free, like the rookies. And if you get Tyrone Tracy or somebody like that, like you win big. And if you get the wrong guy, you win nothing. But you're like, Chandler is blowing blocking assignments. And you've got Darnold who's going to play. They realize that mid preseason when McCarthy goes out. And you just can't leave him under pressure. Like you have to do everything you can to protect him. And so there goes Ty Chandler. Is that too simplistic?
No, I mean, that was a clear early in training camp that they just didn't trust him. And it became even more clear early in the season that they didn't trust him. And he came into a game after Jones got hurt and fumbled immediately. and it's like, okay, on a pitch. So it just hit him and bounced off him. And that just, seemed to bring an end to that. And then they went and got Cam Akers. I mean, yeah, I understood why they weren't doing it because they couldn't trust him. Even last year, he just didn't even run the right way, like in actual games. There were games where Nick Mullins was turning around last year and going to hand the ball off and being like, okay, you're actually on the other side. So I'll just, you're going the wrong way. What's the movie there? Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. You're going the wrong way. It's the same thing with Ty Chandler. So I understood, but also for someone to look like they were your young running back who could be the next man up to just disappear off the face of the earth from having 400 yards the previous season is pretty a pretty big blow to
Well,
their future at that position, really.
I would say a guy like that has a very small chance of ever hitting
Oh yeah.
at this point.
Yep.
Not a big draft capital investment. 2 years gone by, nothing really is happening. Those guys disappear. Dameon Pierce in Houston, there are exceptions, but usually those guys are just kind of lost. And we bring in rookies that don't cost anything, 4th round, 5th round, and see what they can do. And sometimes they pop.
Yep. And that's what they're going to have to do. I'm thinking maybe 3rd round where you're not getting Genty or Omarion Hampton, but maybe Caleb Johnson from Iowa, something like that. And then you pray, I guess, when it comes to the running back position, because we never really know.
This is what I have not had time to do is the rookies. And Minnesota, I've got your 2nd round pick. So that might make a 3rd round running back pick even a little bit more, interesting.
Well, the Vikings, so I know what they're going to do to me. On draft night, I'll be live streaming and they're going to trade out of the 1st round back into the early 2nd. So I'll have spent 5 hours yelling at my webcam here, and then it'll be like, all right, the Vikings are finally up. We're the 24th. Oh, they've traded out to tomorrow. They really need to do that because they have no draft picks. So
This is what happened. This is what happened here last year. So if you want advice, let me know.
It's a tough life over here. Let's talk about maybe some fantasy playoff stuff. You've drafted a fantasy playoff team, so let me bring that up here.
Okay.
What do you got? There's only 2 teams left. How do you draft a fantasy team when there's only 2 teams left?
So this is the gauntlet, which we drafted before the playoffs started. This tournament opened well before the playoffs started. So I've seen teams with like 49ers on them. Anyway, it's best ball, it's underdog. There's $2 million in the prize pool. And you have to finish, I think it was top 2 the first week. But this second week, you have to finish first. So I want you to see, I'm not protecting the names to protect the innocent. Over here on the right, can you see that?
I can.
Is the divisional round score, and it was a tie between myself and the team below me. And what they say, I'm going to pull the roster back up now. The tiebreaker rules have it that the highest scoring player on the teams that are tied, that is the team that advances. But as it happens, this team and myself had exactly the same starting, like, usable players. In this case, it was Jaden Daniels, Barkley, Brian Robinson, Kelsey, McLaurin. You see, like, Jalen McMillan lost the first week. There's nothing you can do about it. That's best ball, and we don't make any changes. So the last line of the tiebreaker in this tournament, if you have all the same players that count in your lineup, is which team drafted first. And I don't know of a better way to do that necessarily, but I'm checking like every couple hours to see if they've advanced the pods, to see, like, because my team is listed first and I want that to matter. I've emailed, you probably know somebody. I've emailed Underdog support like a couple of times and they can't give me the answer. So we wait. But if this team goes through, Matthew, look at its potential. Mahomes, Pacheco, Kelsey, Worthy, they're all playing this week. Daniels, Robinson, McLaurin with Barkley, they're all playing this week. It's not perfect to win the whole thing, because of the fact that I won't have like the Super Bowl perfect. Kansas City and Washington gives me the best chance, but there probably are not enough guys. That's how you have to draft those things, is lean as hard as you possibly can into whatever teams you're sort of starting with. But the Lions teams are out, the Ravens teams are out, and that team is kind of exciting. It's my only one through out of, I think I drafted 19. 6 got to the second round. Not great, but getting one through with the Kansas City Washington build is exciting if I actually drafted that team before the guy that I tied with, and I still don't know. But I'll promise to let you know when I find out.
That sounds like Roger Goodell's playoff tiebreakers, where it's like which stadium smells better is going to be the tiebreaker if they have the same record and the same conference record or whatever. It's funny because we talked about that strategy of if you pick one of those teams that's not expected to get deep into the playoffs and somehow they pop and make the Super Bowl, well, that seems to be your Washington. And I was going to ask you this question. Jaden Daniels is a what pick for next year in fantasy? I mean, he's got to be top 3 for quarterbacks. Is it Jackson, Allen, and Jaden Daniels?
I think it's maybe still Hurts, but then Daniels, it's not Richardson anymore. It's not Mahomes anymore. But yeah, the run pass combination always made Daniels very exciting for fantasy. And they'll probably, like, I think Washington is positioned to add a receiver and give him like more. So you could have a jump next year that could make him quarterback one. So I think the upside there with Daniels is very exciting. I would say in a dynasty startup, so you and I should do one of these this year if you want. You want to be in a dynasty league. These are players you keep forever. And super flex is the more popular format these days where you start 2 quarterbacks. There's an argument that Daniels should be the 101 in a dynasty super flex, so young, kind of old for a rookie, but still like younger than Allen and Hurts and Jackson by a few years. That's pretty exciting. And yeah, back to that playoff build, like you couldn't just draft the Chiefs and the Lions or the Eagles and the Bills. Like it was hard to get, it's a 6-player draft like one you were in, and you really can't have that. So you want to find these teams that sort of make sense from the other conference. I did teams with Philadelphia and the Chargers. The Chargers were more interesting to me than the Texans, but that died abruptly. So those teams, didn't get past round 2. McConkey could have gotten you to round 2, but not past round 2 because that's a 0. And Kansas City and Washington was pretty easy. And Washington afforded you that upside with Daniels and McLaurin and even Robinson. I liked Eckler actually a little bit more than Robinson, but that team has Robinson on it. You want to make sure to get everybody. And again, you're sort of betting on teams, so there shouldn't be players on teams like that you just avoid because you don't know. Like De'Ami Brown became somebody this year that was relevant in fantasy football. If you like the team, you want to make sure to see the whole board and acknowledge guys that maybe were not on your radar individually.
I was thinking about Washington just reacting to that game, and it is, maybe an overreaction, I guess, but probably not to say that if you were to pick one franchise going forward in the NFC and just circle them and say, I want to be them. Someone just decided to like football today and they said, well, you're a football guy. Who should I like? I'd say, are you comfortable with how bad the nickname Commanders are?
I know.
Or so is bad. Because as long as you're comfortable with that, I would pick Washington over every other team in the NFC and probably over every other team in the NFL that is not Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City. And I think that's a safe play. Maybe Houston would be one other that is in this ballpark, but Washington is going to have the rookie quarterback hack. And I think that Daniels is more special than Stroud. As great as Stroud is, the running element, when Detroit sent a corner blitz and Daniels went, oh, someone's blitzing? Okay. And by and just ran right away from the guy with total ease. You're like, yeah, and he's accurate and he's poised and he's a leader of the team and he's in command and he just is everything you could dream of a franchise quarterback, which should not be terribly shocking. He was the number 2 overall pick and he averaged more yards per rush in his last year in college than Lamar Jackson did at his best, and he averaged more yards per pass than Andrew Luck did. So, I mean, this is a guy you take at the top and build your franchise with. So,
That's a really interesting thought experiment. Like, which team in the NFC right now would you most like to be? It wouldn't be the Lions, and it wouldn't be the Niners. It wouldn't be the Rams. Philadelphia seems to be able to win despite like all these sort of individual dramas that are happening there. Like the coach is terrible, and AJ Brown is reading books, but they just, here they are as a pretty good favorite in the NFC Championship. Carolina is a little interesting for this, but there's a lot of teams in the NFC you would not want to be.
oh, I agree with that. Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to get maybe one of these head coaches to read my book as they have to decide whether they're going to go for fourth down. Like, where was it that he wrote about that in Football is a Numbers Game? Why don't
I just
we?
reread your book, by the way.
Oh, you did? Well, thank you.
I reread it. Yeah, I
What?
was more, if I may, like the first time by read, I mean listen to. I hope that that's interchangeable at this point. But the first time I listened to it, I was driving an RV from Buffalo to Florida and listened to it like straight through, which was great. It was like half the ride was your book. But there were parts where I was sort of like tuned out, and I went back and listened to the latter stuff with Collinsworth and, sort of how the company was moving on from a lot of its key people. So anyway, I meant to tell you that offline, but I did reread it.
Oh, by the way, just connected to the book, if you were watching the national championship game in college, Marcus Freeman is over on the sideline and he's got his play card. And if you looked to his right, was a guy named Anthony Tresh who
Yes.
worked for PFF and who was helping him with in-game decisions and so forth. He was their analytics director who had come up through PFF. But another one of those key people they lost, along with Eric, who works for Carolina, and Mike Renner, who works for CBS, and Steve Palazzolo, who works for 33rd Team, and Sam Monson. So it's really dispersed since I wrote the book. They had all their key people, and then now they are strewn about. So that's only 3 years ago that I was writing the book. So
Yeah.
anyway, underdog fantasy pick'ems for this weekend. I mean,
Oof.
this is, you know what this is a time for? To sign up with the code PURPLE, my friends,
Yeah, this is it.
because this is a great way to watch the game and the best and easiest place in the world to play fantasy sports. I mean, I had a good year with it, having never played fantasy on the internet before. So it's the best app, the easiest website to use. And in terms of pick 'em, you just pick stats higher or lower. You can win up to 20 times your money by going 5 for 5. So we're going to do some of that right now. Use that code PURPLE and get your special pick and first time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Must be 18 or older. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.com. So there you go. It's also a good way to support the show if you use that code PURPLE. All right. Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels. How about those guys? 181. How about him? 181.5 passing yards for Jalen Hurts. Will he throw the pigskin in the general direction of A.J. Brown, his best wide receiver, and then see if he catches it?
So I did a 4-player pick 'em off of that game, and I went yes to your question, which was higher than 4.5 receptions for AJ Brown. You might need Washington to keep it close for that, but we're all just sort of making bets, predictions on what kind of game it is. And mine would be on this one that Philadelphia is the better team. Washington is feisty and keeps it a game, but that the talent of AJ Brown wins out. I haven't gotten into the granular stuff on like cornerback receiver matchups or what happened in previous meetings, but just sort of on a basic level, I like the idea of Brown getting to 5 catches. It's been a long time since he's had a really big game. So I like that. I would go higher on Zach Ertz in this game over 3.5. Daniels has really used him. Revenge narrative, Matthew. I know you love that.
Oh yeah.
So I will go higher on Ertz, lower on De'Ami Brown, the same number, 3.5. Like, okay, if I get beat there, I'll just have to eat that. And I'll take a Hurts rushing touchdown as well, because that's been pretty safe over the years. That's 11-1 to win a four bagger.
Oh, really? Okay. How about Daniels? 224.5 higher, lower on his passing yards. I think that they're going to have to score and he's going to have to throw. If you get behind, you're just going to have to pass it, pass it, pass it, pass. And I feel like 224 is not that high of a number for him. So I like them to kind of get behind a little bit. The only thing is, the Eagles have this secondary that
I know.
is really nasty. And we saw it last week against Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, Slay and Cooper DeJean. Like they're good. And Washington has one really good wide receiver, but the other guys are kind of just guys. So I could see him being held under. And there is a little bit of history here. Quarterbacks who are rookies that get into this game usually do not play very well in this game. Like this is the point where it's like, yeah, okay, well, you're a rookie, your team's not there yet, you're not there yet, and they come apart. I still think he's going to throw a lot, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I want to do with Daniels. I like Eckler too, I guess, in that kind of game script where they could throw the ball to him a few times. But there is a chance that Philadelphia is too much. I do like for Daniels. That's why I can't really say, like, I'm not sure, is that he's seen them twice, so at least it's not a team where he's rolling in and like just not familiar with what they're going to look like. Philadelphia has the challenge of coming up, and Washington just beat them the last time they played in a fairly high scoring game. So Philadelphia's challenge is sort of something else to come up with to, throw him off. Leaves me sort of ambivalent on Daniels.
How about there's two quarterbacks over in the AFC, fairly notable gentlemen.
What
Patrick
game is that
Patrick,
again?
yeah, I know. Search through, leaf through your notebooks here to find it. It is on page 642. Chiefs and Bills, 254.5 passing yards for Patrick Mahomes. I just don't see it. I mean, he just doesn't do this anymore. He just doesn't throw for 350 yards anymore. And if Kansas City is going to win this game, there's one drive that I would look at from Baltimore, and I know they're very differently constructed teams, but there's one drive that I would look at Baltimore and say, you know what, Kansas City might be able to do that. And it's the one where they ran every play, where the Ravens ran every play. And again, different offensive lines, different structures, different running backs, that's for sure. But even Justice Hill was getting yards against Buffalo.
Yep.
I think they're going to play this game where they just try to control the clock the entire game, plod down the field, convert third downs, kick field goals, and just try to never give the ball to Josh Allen.
Yeah. I just think what I want to do with this game is lean on everybody that's already been great to be great. I think this game is just so elevated, like what it is and what's on the line. I would never pick against Allen here. I mean, he threw for 120 something against Baltimore, but there's no way I'm not going higher on Allen if I'm using Allen. I could go lower on Cook in that kind of game where it's just like Josh Allen's moment. That number is 54.5 rushing. The Bills Cook only plays like half the snaps anyway, ever. So I don't really want to pick him to go off. He could break one, but Kansas City's defense, they're so familiar with each other. I'll go Allen higher, Cook lower. I'll go Mahomes higher too. The Bills will put the pressure on him. And in the 3 playoff meetings between these teams, Mahomes has, I believe, 8 touchdown passes, 26 incompletions, and no picks. Last year, he didn't have the yards. Last year, they went 9 yards per play. We'll find out later today, as you and I record on Wednesday morning, injury status with some key Bills defensive players, Taylor Rapp was injured Sunday. Christian Benford in the concussion protocol, their best corner guy. And Matt Milano even left the game for the last few plays against Baltimore. So there could be, I say could be, I don't know, a little bit of weakness there from the Bills defense, which really has not been that good anyway. I mean, the Ravens just ripped through them, but turned the ball over 3 times and then dropped a game-tying pass at the end. And I'll throw in DeAndre Hopkins, who isn't doing much at all for Kansas City, but it sort of correlates with a Mahomes game. One pick is higher than 8.5 receiving yards in the first half. That's 10 to win 66.
Travis Kelce's number is pretty high, 6.5 receptions, but I just don't see how that doesn't happen.
I know.
How could he come anywhere short of like 10? He's just going to throw the ball to him the whole game.
That's what I'm saying. So just lean into the guys that you've seen be the leading men for these two teams, so to speak.
Again, play along with us, promo code PURPLE over at Underdog Fantasy. And let me ask you a final question here before. That's the question. You ruined it. How did you know?
Because you did this to me other times. Like, who goes to the Super Bowl? I said Kansas City and Detroit, I think, when you asked me that. So I'll change it. Am I allowed to change it from Kansas
You're allowed
City?
To, yeah, you're allowed to take Detroit out of it. So
I'll change both sides. You know, it just so feels like this is the Bills' time. Mm-hmm. And they've beaten Kansas City in the regular season 4 years in a row. Right? Who has that? Who can claim that? They've been really just next to Kansas City's level. If you're somebody who thinks the playoffs are different, the emotions, the feelings are different, then it's easier to get to the Chiefs. But I am not. I think if I could go to this game with any AFC roster, if I could go to the Super Bowl, I should say, with any AFC roster, I would pick the Ravens. I mean, I think they were the best team in the conference. But it just feels like it's the Bills' moment. All these losses. What do we even say? I guess I'm just trying to speak this into existence, right? Like, what am I talking about for the next 9 months in Buffalo if they lose again in the playoffs to the Chiefs? And I think the Eagles are too good.
I agree. I think Buffalo, Philadelphia Super Bowl makes the most sense here. And
then they would have met all 4 NFC East teams in the Super Bowl. We'd like to have that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
Trying to keep my shoulder just above the old Washington logo so I don't get in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't have to put like a tag on the
blurred out
the YouTube thing. Yeah. Well, we'll see, man. We'll see. I wish you the best and an enjoyable post-game show on Sunday. So
thank you. I hope we keep going. If Buffalo wins, I think I would join you from New Orleans.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be the on-site person. That would be fantastic.
Yes.
So thank you for your time. And we'll have, 2 more? 3 more? 2 more shows?
As many as you want, Matt. As many as you want.
Okay. Very good. Mike, thanks very much. The Deep End and ADP Chasing. Make sure you check out those podcasts as well. And we'll talk to y'all soon. Football.
Bye.